All right. Well, I'm super excited to have Elizabeth on from Creatively Focused. I'm a huge believer in serendipity, and I think 2 years ago, maybe going on three now, which is kind of crazy to think, I met Elizabeth during kickoff of my cohort of Lunar Startups. She came by to support the incoming crew, and she was an alum at the time of the program. And so, coming full circle, I had a chance to reach out to see if she would join on the Founders Cut, and she said yes. And I think she's working on something really, really cool. So I don't want to bury the lead and misspeak on it. So before we get to the company, I'd love for you to kind of introduce yourself. Like, who are you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Elizabeth Orme. I am a founder. I'm a CEO. I'm a mom to a 7 and a 4-year-old and a wife to a marvelous man who has supported every wild dream that I've had on this journey of entrepreneurship. Um, I am an educator. I was a researcher to start. I was an educator following. I don't think either of those things go away. Um, and now I'm just kind of on this crazy ride of building a business.
Well, first of all, let me just say you rattled off like four full-time jobs, so kudos to you. Um,
Feels like that sometimes.
Yeah, well, I feel like you gotta give credit where credit is due. You talked about being an educator, and I know that plays really, really into obviously leads directly into why you started your company.
Yeah.
Maybe kind of like the foundation story, and then leading into what you're actually doing with the company.
Sure. So most educators go into education like right after college, right? They decide I'm going to be a teacher and this is what I'm going to do. I went kind of a non-traditional route into becoming a teacher. So I started out thinking, I love research. I am going to learn more about the research world. I always kind of had this vision of working in academia and publishing research journals because I read them at night. And that has just been something that, I think since I went to college, that was something that really interested me. So yes, I was totally like that junior in college going to bed at night, not like watching a show, but reading a research journal. So, um, so I found myself at the University of Chicago working in research. And the first project that I got assigned to was working with teacher work circles. So, what that meant for me is that as a research assistant, I would go to the university at like 6 p.m. I would have a group of teachers come in who had just had their long days of teaching. And these teachers would come together and we'd start really with a mission of collaborating around like how to make really a math curriculum stronger for their students in the area of spatial learning. And they would come in exhausted. Like every single day, every time I met with them, they'd come in just wiped out. And then this like magical moment happened where they would spend 3 hours from like 6 to 9 p.m. with each other. And this was a group of people who didn't know each other before. And they would come in and like just light up. They would go from being totally drained to totally filled up in 3 extra hours of their day, like job number two, essentially. And I would watch it and I just thought like something's different about these people. Like how do they go from being so exhausted to being like so filled up for this thing that they're not getting like paid a bunch of money to do and they're just like joyous about. And that's where my love of like teachers started. I found myself in the space where I was like I want to work with teachers. They are amazing people with these insanely creative ideas, but like what's happening? Why are they all happening here? And like what's happening during the day to not like see the same kind of joy? Like why aren't they coming in with the joy, right? And so at the time thinking I would stay in academia, I was like, well, I'll go be a teacher myself. I don't want to be the person who's like trying to work with teachers and teach them new things without having taught myself. So I found myself in special education mainly because I loved the brain. I loved learning about how different brains work and the unique skills that people with brains that work in different ways kind of bring to really life. And so I went into special education and I went in like, I can do this. I love working with kids. I love paperwork. I love data. This should be a breeze. And 2 years in, I was like, this is crazy. It feels so unsustainable. I felt extraordinarily burnt out. Um, I was spending 60 to 70 hours a week working, and most of that was on paperwork. And again, this wasn't a question of do I feel competent? It was just straight capacity. I was like, and that was before kids. And so I found myself in education, and I knew that it needed to look different. And I spent years just kind of looking at like, how can I make this better for myself? But then going into administration and saying, how can I make this better for other people? And that's where I hit a tipping point. And I spent 7 years doing that and then hit my tipping point.
Wow. Well, you said a lot of things that I wanted to jump in and interject, but that'd be a bad podcast host. Well, first of all, my significant other is a teacher. She teaches 4-year-olds, and the things that give me the most frustration is how hard teachers work, the frontline workers of shaping our youth, and how little credit they're given, and but how much is expected of them. And I
Yeah.
know that like I can only imagine how challenging it is teaching kids in special needs because they all have um, different things that they need focus on, and you as one person need to be that person that focuses on 12 different things for 12 different kids, or maybe more, or maybe less. But I always say that there's going to be a day where there's a fork in the road where society needs to decide, do we value these people or not? Because if you don't, they're going to continue to run for the hills. And so,
Completely.
and so I totally understand, like, not from my own personal experiences. I only taught for one semester at St. Thomas, and I felt mentally drained, and I was teaching adults basically. So I can
Yeah.
only imagine like the complexities of teaching.
Sometimes those adults make hard students.
Yes, that could be true too. But so, I think it's kind of magical what you talked about in terms of like these teachers being re-energized after they had a session doing the 3 hours a week with you. I think oftentimes they're getting beat down for so long during the work week that having a place to go where they can relate to the other people in the room, and they all know the same feelings, they all know the same. I think of it like when a vice president or a director or a manager comes into a team meeting, and all the employees are there being told what they need to do and how they need to do it, and they all roll their eyes. They're like, "Oh, who is this person telling us like how does this work?" Like
Yeah.
they sit in their ivory tower and try to
Yeah.
tell us like how this is done. So um,
Yeah.
so many things that you said are just like, yep, I can totally see how you found a magical place. And you know I'm super excited for what you're doing because you're bringing scale to an industry that's never really scaled. It's always been very uh, piecemeal. It's always been very ad hoc. It's always been very
Homegrown,
fragmented,
homegrown
homegrown,
solutions. Yeah.
tribal knowledge, all that kind of stuff. So, anyway, I'd love to learn more, maybe at a high level for people listening.
Yeah.
Um, what is the magic of what you're doing?
Sure. So, I mentioned earlier, one, I love that you just used the word value, because what actually happened at that table with those teachers is like they came in and they felt valued right away, right? Like they were there to bring their expertise. They heard from us like just how extremely appreciative we were that they were there. Um, they felt like the experts in the moment, and then they were connected. And so what we're doing is we're bringing those three elements into all the work that we're doing with teachers. We're making sure that they feel valued, that they feel like an expert, and that they feel connected. And the researcher in me has to tell you that that's been the research for 20 years. For 20 years, we know why teachers leave the field, right? They need to feel those three things. And so what we started to do, so I actually started the business in 2016. So we've been around a while. We started as a services company, and we came in to really consider what special educators needed to feel those three things. We knew they needed to feel them, but like what were we going to do to help those feelings kind of scale up? Um, and it showed up in a lot of different ways. It showed up in just acknowledging, one, your job is hard, right? We've been in your shoes. We acknowledge that it's hard, kind of what you said earlier, where it's like we didn't have to talk so much about it or ask so much about why it's hard. We just knew. And
Hmm.
that in itself made teachers feel valued. It
You're
made them
credible.
heard. Yeah, it just it helped them to feel not alone. It helped them to feel like there were other people out there feeling the same feels. And if we think about that, isn't that all of us really want, right? Like to know we're not alone in our feelings. So there was this big kind of psychology element, and my degree was in psychology. So I keep leaning on that because I'm like, clearly I'm interested in that and it'll keep showing up in everything that I do. Um, but what we set out to do is to say, we know that student outcomes are extremely important and extremely important for this vulnerable population of students. We know the number one factor in that is the relationship between the teacher and the student. That can't exist if the teachers don't stick around, right?
Hmm.
Like if we don't have people staying in the field, if we don't have people feeling more competent and more secure in the work that they're doing, we're not going to see those outcomes in students that we really want to see. And
Hmm.
so, what are we going to do to shift that? And our whole job was to say, okay, what if we focus on the educator as the user instead of the student as the user? So, as we started to build a technology off of all the services work that we had done, we just kept saying to ourselves, like, the learner in the adult matters.
Hmm.
The kind of feelings of the educator matter, but we're going to focus completely on the adults here. And
Hmm.
that's, I think, what really makes us stand out in the industry right now is that we're kind of yelling that the adults really matter here. If we can't do something to support these adults in different ways, we're not going to see the outcomes that we want to see for students.
Yeah, I think this is such a genius thing. And, shout out to psychology. It was actually, so I did biology for my undergrad. And if I could go back in time, I would, I would minor in psych. And I tell a lot of young people that they should take classes in the psych side, even if they aren't psych majors, because it's not even about learning how to interact with others. It's done so much for me from like the books that I've read to understand myself, right? And so like knowing what I do wrong or what I do well helps me just kind of in my day to day. And so I think the fact that you're a psychologist or psychology expert working in this space, coming at it from an angle that might not just be like, I think it's good that you have a different vector into it than like a traditional like hardcore educator that's been doing it for 20 years. It says it's got to be done this way. It's got to be done this way. You're coming
Yeah.
at it from the human perspective
Yes.
because fundamentally, like at a baseline, we're all humans, and a lot of things that you said about teachers, I was laughing to myself about like, yeah, these skills are things that every workforce should know because people want to be heard, people want to be given opportunities, they don't want to feel like they're stuck in a in like a sand pit where they can't get out. They want to know that they have mobility. They want to know that their skills are valued. And so like all the things you said about educators, I feel like churn and retention issues that corporations have in general could also be solved with what you're building out with creatively focused. So, um, you know, stepping from that, let's talk about some of the things that you're very proud of accomplishing as you kind of pivot now from being a services based company to now being a tech based, scalable opportunity for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my first kind of accomplishment thing I'm proud of is that I took the day off work and I
Yeah, there you
created a
go.
company, right? Like, I think that's, I think we get in this journey and like we kind of forget those like what now seem minor things being pivotal moments, and things that maybe we didn't like sit in and be like, oh yeah, good job, right? But then you look back and you're like, well, none of this would be here if I hadn't done that. And so I had one day in October of 2016 that I took a day, personal day off of work, and I just said, this is it. I'm either going to do it or I'm not. And I submitted and registered the name of the company, and off we went, right? And I think like that's my first big accomplishment. I think the next step from there was growing that services business. It's a totally different business than what I'm doing now. Like here I am sitting an educator that runs a technology company. Did I ever think I would be an researcher educator and then running a technology company? No, like, absolutely not. But what happened there was that I I'm proud of the growth that the services business had, that I was committed to doing something different, that I got fed up with feeling like teachers deserved better and kids deserved better, and I went and did something.
Hmm.
I love action. I love like taking action. I love moving through things, even when they're hard. Um, I just think that if we're moving and doing, then things are changing. So, um, I think growing that services business was a huge accomplishment. I think saying out loud at Lunar Startups on my pitch day, I'm going to build a technology that's going to scale this idea. I will never forget that day because I quite literally said it out loud and then walked away and was like, "What are we doing?" And then, 2 years later, being able to say, here it is, all of my whiteboards, all of my notebooks, kind of all of my dreams of what I wish I would have had. Being able to see people clicking through it and
Yeah.
now seeing over 1,000 special educators clicking through it and getting the support they need,
Yeah.
um, is really, it's a dream and it's coming true. And I'm really excited about it.
Well, hopefully you took pictures of all your whiteboards and saved all your notebooks
So I've got them all.
for that book that you write later when this is all said and done. Um, I think well, I have a lot of things that I would love to talk about, but obviously, I want to get people excited about what you're doing. So tell me a little bit about like the action is special educators jump on the platform. What are some of the results that you're seeing? Are you seeing better outcomes? Are you seeing less churn? Are you seeing happier, facilitators, less burnout? Like, I'd love to just kind of hear some of the fruits of your labor.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I mentioned, we have about 1,000 special educators on the platform. What's really exciting is we're now in 7 states. So, we started, of course, in Minnesota. That's where we had our services business and did those things. That moment to expand into new states and go to a national conference and say any educator can use this was huge. And so, what we're seeing already is that it's that balance between the psychology and like what we consider to be the high impact activities, which are like the reasons people go into teaching, right? So I go into teaching because I want to help that student that's right in front of me. I want to make sure that that student like has a light bulb moment. I want to make sure that that student feels confident. Those are high impact. Low impact are the things that you have to do because there's a legal deadline, or the data that you have to enter because you know that ultimately it tells you if it's working or not, what you're doing. But they don't really fill your cup if you're a
Mm,
standard educator coming into education. It's not why you got into it. So what we're seeing already is that we're seeing special educators workload lessen. And we are really big on saying like do less,
mhm,
and that can be controversial sometimes, right? Because really, as a society, what have we been doing for years? We say do more with less, right? Teachers, do more, do more, do more. Well, we're done saying it. We are saying do less. If you have access three is going to help you to be able to do that. And so little things like instead of counting out all the calendar days on your piece on your calendar with your pen, you're clicking a button and it's done in 10 seconds and there's no error, no human error in it, right? So we're saving, building supervisors time so that they can spend more time with the teachers, and we're helping teachers save time so that they can spend more time with students. So saving time, lessening the load, increasing just educator morale. The fact that they're feeling like they're doing less of those low impact things just
mhm,
helps them feel that more elevated passion on a daily basis, right? It doesn't fizzle out as fast when you have more of it in your day, more of the good stuff in your day. And then, finally, the big thing that we're seeing is like we're seeing special educators embrace being the learner that they are. And so they're doing things like taking a 15-minute micro course when they have a new kid in their classroom and they don't know how to work with them. They can get to what they need to. And they're leaving us comments being like, this was so straightforward. I
mm,
applied it today, right? We're seeing them being able to like take and do again, like back to that action piece, instead of feeling like, I need to write all my sub plans, go out for a day, get some learning,
mhm,
hope that I remember something and let something sticks. And then like 6 months later, look at a notebook that I didn't do a whole lot from,
mhm.
right? So we're
Yeah.
just seeing that like that day-to-day impact. Like what are the things that are lessening your load on a daily basis? The mental load, the physical load. And that is where we're really excited, because that's where we're going to see retention. That's where we've started to have people say, I'm more likely to stay in my job with Access 3 in my life.
Oh my gosh, that's such a huge incentive for anyone that's trying to run a school system to hear,
Yeah.
right? First of all, I think every teacher should have access to this. So if you're listening and you have any, inroads into school districts, I don't think this should just be limited to special educators. Maybe you want to limit it that way, but from my perspective,
We already have people asking, like,
love
when
it.
do the general
Yeah.
educators get
Yeah.
this? Yeah.
Because I know a lot of educators that are K through 12. Some of them are still fighting a good fight, but I also know some that sadly just said I can't fight this fight anymore and have left. And uh, you know, I'm always the first to push, and this is shame on me, but I've always been very transparent. I tell teachers to leave. I tell them it's not worth your own sanity to be a martyr for the system. And if you
Mhm.
can find someone that's going to make your life easier at home, make your relationship with your family better, make your health better, leave. Because at the end of the day, right now, there isn't something that's going to fix it. And so, I think what you're doing gives hope. You said something about taking these 15-minute sessions. I think it's so cool because it's just proof of work, right? Because we all have a bag that we put boulders in, our responsibilities. And, for teachers, that bag generally either gets upgraded to a bigger size bag to fit more boulders, or they just stack them on top, right?
Yeah.
And I think the reason why people are taking these 15-minute sessions is because you've effectively taken some of those smaller pebbles that are creating the foundational layer of a burden out and
Yeah.
giving them room to take on more creative thinking, more learning, more education, more access to just their mental health. Because if you're burned out, you're not going to take that 15-minute session to learn about something else.
No, and that's oftentimes what we're seeing, is that when they first come on, it's that, the first thing we hear is like, well, I'm not going to have time for those 15 minutes,
Hmm.
right? And so we had to be really intentional about, like, how long are the things that we're setting up
Hmm.
for them? We're not expecting you to do a 2-hour course. Do we have 2-hour courses? For sure, but they're all broken down into 15-minute segments. And what we're starting to see, which is really exciting, is that teachers are starting to self-enroll into areas that they're excited about. So
Hmm.
like that one teacher, like my first year again, teaching 5th and 6th graders how to read. If my passion is actually teaching 10th and 11th graders how to regulate, well, I want to start some of my learning there so that when I go and do it, I feel like a rock star there.
Hmm.
So that's what we're starting to see more of, is like, within your field, within any field, when you can find your kind of niche and you can find that kind of passionate area where you want to research for fun or you want to learn for fun, that's where we see retention increase.
Yeah, I think what you've unlocked is you've hacked the 80/20 of teaching, right? You spend
Mhm.
80% of your time doing the tedious things, but really where you get your fulfillment and your recharging and your like the feeling of accomplishment is from that 20% of stuff that you're doing. And maybe you're not going down, maybe you're not taking all 80% away, but even if you're taking like 5, 10,
Yeah.
15% of that away, you're giving them more space to carve out for that part that's more rewarding and more,
Absolutely.
engaging and fulfilling and sustaining. So very, very cool. And we could probably talk about this forever. So I do want to kind of pivot a little bit. I want to do a little bit of, um, you know, uh, promotional stuff. If people want to find you, how
Yes.
can they get a hold of you or your team to learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, they can head to www.creativelyfocused.net. So they can head to the website. We are on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook at creatively.focused. Otherwise, they can shoot us an email, hello@creativelyfocused.net. I see almost all of them. I like can't give it up. I love seeing the random reach outs that we
That's
get
the
from
disease of
people.
a CEO. That's
Oh, I
the
know.
that's the problem.
Fortunately, I have an awesome team and awesome people who are like, we're going to take this on first, but we know you want to be able to see some of this. So they filter it a little bit for me. But I would love to hear from anyone that has those connections that way and that is really thinking about like who this could help in their life.
And then, what's the ideal type of person you want connections to? Because
Mhm.
this kind of the whole serendipity thing is really big for me. So I have random people from various different parts of the country and with different backgrounds that watch these videos.
Yeah.
So like, if someone's listening and they say, "How can I help?" Like, who are the types of folks you're trying to get connected with?
Sure. So there are a couple layers. So special education teachers are great. That is who we want to support. I also know, having been a special educator, that if I am put with the weight of saying like find out and learn about this new tool and bring it to the right person, like that can be really overwhelming. And so it is either a teacher who's like in a lead position or a teacher who really is like so excited about this that they want to tell everybody about it. Those are the teachers we're looking for. Outside of that though, we want to go big, right? And so when we're doing district-wide implementations, we're talking to superintendents, assistant superintendents, and special education directors and coordinators. So we want to get to your administrators because those administrators can make the decisions. Everything costs something, right? And they're the ones that control the money. So we want to be able to connect with those people so that then we can say, yes, all your teachers can come on to Access 3.
Love it, love it. And I think for people listening, if you're an investor or an angel investor, you should reach out just to see where they're at, what they're doing, see if there's to grow big, you sometimes need to take on capital. So I won't speak on that front for too long, but if I were in the space of ed tech, I'd definitely reach out to Elizabeth to learn more. I know just from updates and stuff that they're growing like a weed. So I think you'll be super excited if you have a chance to chat with her about the opportunity. As we wind this down, anything in particular you want to bring up, people you want to shout out? I'll kind of give you free reign to throw anything out there.
I mean, I just have to say special educators doing the work every day. Like you said, right? Like it's such a hard time. I started this company before the pandemic, already knowing it was a problem. And then of course that was a whole nother layer on top of this.
Hmm.
But those educators that are showing up every single day and no matter what like weight they have on them, they are there for those kids. Um, when I hear the stories of what they're doing and I get to connect with those people, it's what brings like my whole body can feel it. I remember all of those feels. And so, especially right now, they're in that period of time between like Thanksgiving break and holiday break. And it can feel really hectic.
Mm.
And they all know what January looks like after that too. And then they know what March looks like. And I say that because all special educators will know exactly what I'm talking about when they think about the beginning of March. Um, and I think just, calling out the fact that they're why we're here. I'm showing up every day because I know that they deserve all of this. They deserve every piece of support that they can get, meaningful support, and they deserve support coming from somebody who's really been in their shoes and done the work. So
Yeah, what's that famous line from Maya Angelou? It's not what you say or do, it's how you make people feel. And I think that's right. I think at a fundamental level, you're giving these people a feeling, and obviously not just the feeling, but actually giving them a voice and understanding and an acknowledgement of what they're going through. So, I'm super excited to see where the next, frontier of creatively focused goes, because like I just alluded to, I think just general workforce and certainly just general education could certainly benefit from the playbook that you've probably created, not just for special ed. And if I had to guess, you probably got a whiteboard, a secret whiteboard somewhere that's already kind of in progress right now
behind
anyway.
that one.
So, Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining me. I think people are going to really enjoy this one. I can tell through the screen how passionate you are about this, and I'm super excited that you said yes to jumping on.
Thank you so much, Adam. It's been such a pleasure. And I just really appreciate the work you do here. So thank you.
So if you're looking to find out more, head to creativelyfocused.net and reach out, and Elizabeth will see your email because she'll be creeping on it.
Thanks, Adam.